A Karen was stealing electricity to charge her son's electric quad bike. So I installed a circuit that fried her setup. There was a spark, a dry bang, and soon after, the most glorious scream I've ever heard coming across the fence. Karen, my entitled neighbor, was screaming as if her Gucci sneakers had caught fire. Technically, what caught fire was her son's quad bike charger. And technically, she deserved it. You don't steal electricity from an electrical engineer and think you'll get away with it. Not after I warned her, after the homeowners association ignored me, and especially after she said, "It's just a little bit of energy. Relax." Oh, I relaxed, all right. I lit up her yard with enough voltage to transform that generic quad bike into a toaster. But let's go back a bit. To understand this explosive moment of karmic justice, you need to know that it all started with a strange jump on my home energy monitor. I'm not just a guy with a multimeter and a grudge. I'm a certified systems engineer and I design energy infrastructure for data centers. Electricity is my thing. I love it. When my solar inverter started registering phantom consumption outside peak hours, I noticed it right away. Most people wouldn't even notice. I live in a quiet neighborhood where people brag about their lawn edges and their own organic compost. I keep to myself, tinkering with my home network and hunting anomalies. That week, I noticed something weird. Every night between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., there was a consumption of 1.8 kilowatts that didn't match any of my appliances. It wasn't the air conditioner, nor the jacuzzi, nor the backup battery cycling. It was something external. That's when I suspected the leech next door, Karen. You know the type. Super expensive sunglasses, ship horn voice, and zero notion of others' boundaries. She moved here 2 years ago after a messy divorce and has been parading poor decisions ever since. Drunken wine brunches and homeowners association fines that mysteriously never stick. Her favorite pastime? Making up rules and citing the homeowners association as if it were the Constitution. She once yelled at a 10-year-old because he rode his bike too close to her hydrangeas. Lately, her obsession was a turbocharged electric quad bike she bought for her teenage son. Noisy, flashy, and worse, powered by electricity. I noticed the cable when I was trimming the hedge. An orange cable slithering over the fence like a snake and disappearing behind my tool shed. I blinked. Impossible, I thought. I don't even have an external outlet there. Unless... No. She wouldn't be that brazen. That night, I turned off all the external circuit breakers except one, just to test. In the morning, there it was. A gap in the records at exactly 2:12 a.m. I went to the fence. The cable was no longer there, retracted, hidden, but I had taken photos in time. I decided to talk to her politely. Maybe it was an accident. Her son plugged in without realizing. I knocked on her door the next day. She opened wearing leggings, sunglasses, and holding a mimosa, as if she were the queen of brunch. I mentioned the consumption and asked if anyone in her house might have used my outlet. She blinked, smiled, and said, "Oh, that. It's just for a quick charge while they're fixing the garage panel. You have solar energy, right? You won't even miss it. That's not how electricity works, nor authorization." I explained that it was theft, however small, and that it interferes with my system. She gave me a little pat on the arm. "Relax, Karate Kid. We're not draining your car battery." I left before saying something I shouldn't. But my mind was already working. I called the homeowners association and reported the theft. They said they would investigate. 3 days later, I received a warning for creating a hostile dynamic and making dangerous modifications to the fence. Guess what? Karen said I had installed electrical traps threatening her family. I was shocked, but I wasn't going to play defense anymore. I'm not confrontational, but if you plug into my network, without asking and then lie, you've entered my territory. Karen didn't know what she had activated. She thought I was just the quiet neighbor with solar panels. She didn't know I designed fail-safe systems for military servers, that I once set up a mini emergency network for a hospital with just spare parts and caffeine. And she definitely didn't know that I was about to turn her nightly party into an expensive fireworks show. I drafted the plan that same night. A bait outlet, irresistible, connected to a perfectly legal circuit. Safe, but destructive. Enough to leave her charger in ashes without putting anyone at risk. It had to be subtle, invisible, and above all, personal. Because she didn't just steal energy. She disrespected my profession. I installed the fake outlet on my side of the fence, at an angle that looked like carelessness, as if it had been left in a conduit of the shed. Tempting, unprotected, energized. Except it wasn't. The outlet was connected to an impedance circuit, calibrated to fry any charger that pulled more than 3A. No common household appliance would trigger it, but a quad bike charger? Certainly. I set the trap. I waited. 3 nights later, the cable appeared again, wrapped, plugged in. I watched from my workshop, sipping tea. At 2:17 a.m., the register showed a spike, exactly as I had planned. The circuit went into action, blue flash, dry crack, and the grand finale. Karen's scream tearing through the night like karaoke ground in a blender. I saw her son running in his underwear, trying to understand why his six-pack abs were now smoking like Halloween decorations. I've never smiled so much, but that was just the beginning. Karen thought she could steal from an engineer and get away unscathed. The voltage that fried the charger was nothing compared to what I was still going to pull off. When the homeowners association got involved again, they made the fatal mistake. They took her side. Then it was war. The morning after the great short circuit, the spectacle continued. I woke up to her stamping her flip-flopped foot, muttering about sabotage and calling the fire department. I stayed at the window with fresh coffee, watching it live. The cable had disappeared. The quad bike was covered with a tarp, crime scene, and Karen wouldn't let go of her cell phone, dramatically narrating how her son was almost electrocuted by a deadly trap. Except there was no shock, just a toasted charger. But I wasn't celebrating yet. That had just been the first act. She hadn't learned her lesson. In fact, near noon, I received a visit. A guy in khakis and a polo shirt, clipboard in hand, flaunting the arrogance of someone who thinks they're going to set things straight. You cannot install unauthorized electrical devices on the property line. He fired without even introducing himself. Guess what? Karen had complained to the homeowners association again, and now they were here to reprimand me for dangerous installations that threaten the community. I held back laughter as he cited regulations. Most had nothing to do with electricity and everything to do with Karen's creativity in interpreting the community manual. I explained that the outlet in question was on my property, legally installed and in compliance with the code. What he didn't know, and what I chose not to mention for now, was that it had a non-lethal surge induction loop, triggered when the current exceeded a certain limit. Totally harmless to people, animals, or unsuspecting squirrels, but catastrophic for sensitive electronics. He made a note on his clipboard and mumbled something about further analysis. I escorted him out politely and offered a cookie. He refused. That's when I knew the story wasn't over. If she was like any entitled person, Karen would double down. They always escalate. And I would have to escalate too. Not in pettiness, but in precision. She wanted to play? Fine. I can play too. But I wasn't going to wait for another cable to crawl over the fence. I needed to know the exact moment it happened. I went back to the drawing board and did what I know how to do. I built a smarter trap. First, I updated the fake outlet. The original circuit had worked, but now I wanted real-time feedback. I added a data logger hidden inside an old garden gnome, connected to my home server. Whenever something was plugged in, it would record the date, time, voltage, consumption, and send an alert to my cell phone. If it exceeded the limit, the outlet would release a timed voltage spike. Not enough to start a fire, but enough to make any charger go puff. I tested it exhaustively on an old leaf blower twice. Then I installed motion-sensing cameras camouflaged in birdhouses and reflectors, material that had been sitting in the garage since an unfinished security upgrade. Now, it had a purpose. One camera pointed at the fake outlet, another at the corner of Karen's yard where the ATV was kept, and the third watching the common fence. Everything went to my server and to the cloud. If Karen sneezed near the outlet, I would have footage. But the trump card was the bait extension cord. I left it hanging on my fence, deliberately coiled, as if I had been lazy in gardening. It was plugged into the dummy outlet and looked functional, except the wiring passed through a surge circuit buried under the flower bed. If Karen or her offspring decided to pull the cord to use again, they would get another little present. 3 nights passed with no activity. I almost thought she had learned. But on the 4th night, exactly 1:42 a.m., my cell phone vibrated. Consumption detected. 2.7 kWh and rising. Soon after, another alert. Limit exceeded. Surge triggered. I opened the live feed and saw, in real time, the flash illuminating the birdhouse camera. The cable shook, the charger sparked, and the ATV let out an ouch, as if giving its last breath. Karen's son, shirtless and confused, jumped back like a startled deer. He tried to pull the plug, but it was too late. Smoke rose from the charger again. Not as dramatic as the first time, but enough to send the message. I smiled, satisfied. The system worked. It worked perfectly. In the morning, the cable disappeared again, but the damage was done for the second time. And I had video, date, time, and location. This time, I didn't wait for the Homeowners Association to come with more nonsense. I printed a stack of captures and went straight to their office. The attendant, Janice, I think, flipped through everything, eyes wide, face closing. "You're saying she plugged into your outlet without authorization?" she asked. "Twice," I replied. "I have complete logs and footage. Take a look at the bylaws. Section 8B. Unauthorized access to utilities." Janice pursed her lips. She knew the rule, but Karen was close to 2 board members, so it wouldn't be that simple. "We'll need a formal analysis," she said. "In the meantime, I suggest removing external outlets to avoid escalation." "Janice," I said, leaning in, "this community finds mailbox colors, but lets Karen pull illegal cables over the fence." I was patient. I kept to myself. "But I don't think you understand the system I have here. If you want, I'll cut my entire house from the grid and live 6 months just on battery. I don't need your outlet policy. I need you to enforce the rules. Or I'll take this material to the city utility company and report the theft." She blinked, mouth opening and closing. "The ball's in your court," I concluded as I left. That night, Karen came stomping up to my porch. No mimosa, no sunglasses, just fury. She demanded to know what I had done to her ATV. I said I had no idea what she was talking about. She yelled that her son was traumatized. I replied that maybe he should stop stealing energy. She threatened to sue me. I warned her that I had footage, logs, and an engineering degree that said otherwise. Then I handed her a flash drive. "What's this?" she growled. "Everything you need to realize you chose the wrong neighbor," I replied, calmly closing the door. She didn't knock again, but I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Entitled people like Karen don't give up. After a defeat, they move on to retaliation. It's always been that way. And when it happened, I would be ready with more than a surge circuit. I would have the truth, the law, and a neighborhood full of witnesses, because I discovered that I wasn't the only one Karen had been stealing from. And when the rest of the folks found out, that's when the real electrical storm would begin. 3 days after I delivered the flash drive, the fireworks began. Not the literal ones. Those had already happened with the smoking charger. But the social ones. Karen didn't get the message. If she thought I was bluffing, she decided to double down like only a suburban tyrant can. That morning, a police car parked in my driveway. The officer was polite but firm. Apparently, Karen had filed a report accusing me of deliberately installing a dangerous electrical apparatus that had put her family at risk. I asked the officer if she had also mentioned that her family had plugged into my outlet on my property and that I had security images proving it. The officer blinked. She didn't mention that. He replied, almost embarrassed. I invited him in, took him to my office, opened the videos, and walked him through each second of Karen's son connecting the cable. The time-stamped records showing the energy diversion, the second time, after the first charger had fried. I also showed him the schematic of the outlet, all identified, installed according to code, programmed to trigger only in high current. Totally safe for people, fatal only for electricity thieves. The officer leaned back in his chair and scratched his head. "Wow, you don't mess around." "Indeed, officer," I replied. "I don't play games, but they do, and they're dragging the law into their tantrum." He closed his notebook. "Look, from what I see here, she doesn't have a case at all. This is energy theft. Plain and simple. I'll file the report. If she insists, you're covered with evidence. Honestly, this kind of mess dies when it becomes paperwork." I thanked him. When the patrol car left, I noticed Karen across the street. Arms crossed, sunglasses on, sipping, I bet, the 5th iced latte of the day. She watched the car leave and then shot a withering look at my house, as if challenging me to come out. I didn't give her that pleasure. I had bigger plans. The Homeowners Association soap opera wasn't over yet. The next day, an official letter arrived, golden seal and all, as if it were a royal court, but it was just a bunch of bored retirees. They said I had violated Section 12A, unauthorized electrical installations that posed a risk to community safety. Attached was a $500 fine and mandatory inspection order. Now I was angry. I filed my own complaint, packed with photos, logs, videos, and a complete technical report. I copied the city works inspector and the utility company. If the Homeowners Association wanted to play serious, I would call in the real adults. Then something unexpected happened. Neighbors started coming to me. First was Tom, owner of the outdoor kitchen, fully equipped. 2 houses down. Then Nancy, who would wave but hardly ever spoke. Next, the Patel family, who run a catering service from home. One by one, they came with very specific questions. Hey, have you noticed your refrigerator blinking as if it lost power at night? Have your motion lights ever reset by themselves? Has Karen ever asked to use your external outlets? That last one hit home. I asked if they had experienced similar power outages. Tom nodded. His outdoor mini fridge had been losing temperature overnight. Nancy mentioned that her garden lights would flicker around 2 a.m. and reset. The Patels recounted how an entire freezer had thawed weeks ago, thanks to a mysteriously tripped circuit breaker. That's when it clicked. Karen wasn't stealing just from me. She was running a theft network across the entire block. I invited everyone over for coffee and presented my monitoring system, explained the traps, showed the video of her son invading my yard to plug in the charger. The crowd was speechless. Tom burst out laughing. I knew she was shameless, but this is a gold medal in theft. We created a phone group that day. Shock by Karen. In hours, it had 10 members. By night, 23. We discovered she had been siphoning energy from half the neighborhood for months. Her son would plug extensions into unlocked outlets, garden points, even into an RV hookup while the owner was traveling. No one had proof. Until now. We went house by house installing locks or covers on external outlets. I helped Tom set up a smart monitor. Nancy authorized a bait cable in her yard too. It was no longer revenge. It was community justice. We were tired of the theft, the cynicism, and the pose of someone who thinks rules bend for her. The monthly homeowners association meeting arrived, usually a bore of discussing planter heights and porch colors. Not this time. We showed up in force. Flash drives, screenshots, spreadsheets. One by one, we took the floor and exposed everything. Karen, in the front row, arms crossed, jaw clenched, looked like a cat dropped in a kennel. She tried to speak, tried to deflect. They're exaggerating. This is gossip. Jealousy. But the Homeowners Association president, Greg, a former ally of hers, was squirming uncomfortably. Even he couldn't ignore numbers. Videos, and my police report, delivered in a nice envelope. Then came the bombshell. A neighbor brought in utility bills for the entire year. The value had jumped without explanation just when Karen bought the ATV. Another cross-referenced circuit breaker dates. Everything matched. We built an ironclad case. Karen stood up, shouted that it was persecution, that she had a right to use the community electricity, since the Homeowners Association fees were expensive. Yes, she said, community electricity, as if our outlets were a public square. It was the shot in the foot. The room exploded in protests. Not even Greg saved her. The board voted to suspend her privileges, complete investigation, apply fines. There was even talk of a restraining order. Karen left huffing, almost knocking over the punch table. But it wasn't over yet. There was another revelation, something even I didn't expect. She wasn't using the stolen energy just to charge the ATV. She was hosting parties in her backyard, professional lighting, mini fridges, karaoke, all discreetly plugged into other people's outlets. Her yard was a parasitic nightclub, and I had the images. The storm wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. After the explosive meeting and suspension of privileges, what seemed like just a neighborhood annoyance turned into a full case of serial utility theft, with much larger implications. The thing now required a more technical and thorough treatment, a detailed audit of consumption history, metadata correlations, and forensic review of several months of recordings. Given the numerous complaints from residents, it became clear that Karen's behavior was not limited to sporadic energy pulls. There was a clear pattern of repeated and calculated abuse of infrastructure that did not belong to her. The starting point for the in-depth investigation was precisely in the data collected by the bait systems that I and other neighbors had recently installed. With formal consent, I integrated new smart monitors in several homes affected by the mysterious energy deficit. When all the data was synchronized and overlaid on the electrical map of the neighborhood, a clear picture emerged of consumption spikes caused by external equipment connected and disconnected in the dead of night. The timestamps almost perfectly matched the footage of Karen's son wandering between yards, often disguised as someone who went to fetch a ball or tend to the garden. I went further. I analyzed phase fluctuations and identified transient voltage drops in the subnet serving the street. These weren't normal residential spikes, but indicators of high amperage devices, most likely vehicle chargers or industrial equipment. In other words, an improper use of domestic installations for equipment they should never support. constituting not only a civil infraction but possibly a crime of public utility theft. As I was closing this report, I received feedback from the municipal energy auditor, to whom I had sent all the technical documentation. He confirmed the seriousness of the case. What started as theft between neighbors now qualified as utility fraud, typified in the city code. If the diversion exceeded a certain threshold, and it had, the law provided for criminal liability and recovery charges, and it had indeed exceeded. The sum of diversions attributed to Karen was over 3,000 kWh in 4 months. Beyond the technical data, testimonies emerged, extensions snaking through lawns, lights on in sheds that no one used, circuit breakers tripping out of nowhere. A emblematic case came from a neighbor whose smart irrigation would stop without reason. The records showed voltage drops exactly during Karen's little parties. These reports reinforced the dossier. Using drone images and analyzing luminosity frame by frame, I reconstructed Karen's party circuit. Light strings, amplifiers, coolers, and karaoke, all demanding at least 2.2 kW, far beyond incidental use. And all this load came from extensions crossing fences, passing through service entrance boxes, and in one case, connected to an irrigation box she redesigned without permission. Armed with the evidence, I helped 2 neighbors file a formal complaint with the utility company and requested a complete audit of the street's distribution. In parallel, a lawyer hired by one of the families prepared a civil action for material damages. The plan was simple: demand direct financial reimbursement, open a criminal investigation, and pressure the Homeowners Association to update the regulations to address energy theft. Karen, meanwhile, continued to act as if she were the target of persecution, calling the movement neighborhood fascism in heated conversations at the club. None of this shook the numbers against her. Feeling her own credibility draining away, the Homeowners Association called an emergency meeting. This time, they abandoned the push and shove and took action. Karen was removed from all committees, lost access to common areas, and received a formal order to disconnect any improper cable crossing boundaries. The next blow came by registered letter from the utility company, investigation for meter tampering, and energy theft according to Municipal Code 4.3.7, with scheduled inspection. Karen ignored the warning, and in this case, the next step is a judicial summons. As the news spread, the neighborhood's mood changed from frustration to a sense of victory. Those who had suffered silently for months finally felt heard. Even residents who hadn't lost energy began to complain about Karen's history of privileges. Then came the final bill. The utility company calculated a debt of over $1,800 just in retroactive energy. Adding homeowners association fines, attorney fees, and structural violations, Karen found herself facing a financial hole impossible to attribute to a misunderstanding between neighbors. The official documentation alone exceeded 60 pages, with high-resolution captures, legal definitions, consumption comparisons, and a summary of the community impact. At no point did Karen apologize or take responsibility. Even in the face of overwhelming evidence, she took refuge in denial. But in this scenario, denial wasn't a defense. It was just admitting that she had underestimated the neighbor's ability to react not with tantrums, but with precision, paperwork, and teamwork. The consequences were no longer hypothetical. Now they were measurable, enforceable, and backed by authorities. And upon reviewing the final report, what struck me most was realizing how all of this would have been avoided if Karen had simply asked. A conversation, a polite request, and the story would have been different. But the sense of entitlement, when not contained, becomes delusion. Dismantled here, data point by data point. In the weeks that followed Karen's spectacular downfall, the neighborhood underwent a transformation. For the first time in years, people waved with genuine smiles, not with tired looks. The group that started as a support line against theft became a space to exchange gardening tips, announce events, and send memes about extension cords. In a way, her chaos brought us together. The set of timid houses turned into a front of neighbors who talked to each other, and the common enemy was disconnected. Karen, on the other hand, wasn't adapting to the new reality. Her yard was frighteningly quiet. The ATV, anti-symbol of status and rebellion, disappeared. They say it was sold to pay compensation and fees. The karaoke equipment, little lights, and powerful speakers also vanished. Gone were the low-budget Coachella-style Friday nights, replaced by silence. And a bizarre collection of gnomes scattered on the lawn, a desperate attempt to appear as a cute neighbor instead of an energy thief. The son, former prince of the cul-de-sac, was demoted to handyman. Mowing grass, picking up trash, pulling weeds. Punishment or an attempt to regain goodwill? No one knows. What's certain is that the ATV days are over. The boy now avoids making eye contact with anyone. Meanwhile, the HOA faced its own catharsis. After the meeting where the web of theft was exposed, several directors resigned or lost their positions. There were new elections, and this time the neighborhood really participated. A former firefighter named Gwen became president and didn't waste time. She drafted a revised statute explicitly prohibiting utility theft, authorizing random inspections upon complaint, and creating automatic fines for anyone tampering with installations. She also limited the distance of electrical setups from property lines and required inspection seals on external systems. They invited me to the Safety and Infrastructure Subcommittee. I politely declined but promised occasional consultation. Gwen understood. I don't seek the spotlight. I just want my neighborhood free of absurdities. With the new rules, several neighbors took the opportunity to modernize their electrical systems. I helped some install tamper-proof outlets and taught others to monitor consumption with simple tools. Some joked, "Open the shock guard, it'll be a hit." I laughed, but the idea of turning all this learning into something productive stuck in my mind. As for Karen, the final blow was the true eviction, not from the house but from illusions. The city fined her for energy theft. The HOA charged successive violations. The neighbors she disdained now avoided her. Isolated, demoralized, and without energy, literally she continued trying to sustain the old persona. On a spring afternoon, as we tended to our gardens, she appeared dragging a noisy hose, went to the center of the yard, and began watering the flowers, humming loudly a song no one heard. Someone wrote in the group, "Karen testing the waters again." But like before, no one took the bait. Without energy, there is no chaos. This time, in every sense. I started checking my cameras less and less. The bait outlet remained untouched. The logs, clean. I thought about dismantling the system, but something about it seemed like a badge. Not of war, of vigilance. A reminder that when good people stand up to persistent disrespect, even if it comes in pastel leggings and a fake smile, the result is peace. One day, adjusting my solar system, I heard a voice. "Hi," I turned. Karen was at the boundary of my property, looking like she hadn't slept in days. No sunglasses, no pose. "What is it?" I asked calmly. She hesitated. I think I owe you an apology." I was surprised, but not moved. For what exactly? For the theft? For the lies? For the false report? For the circus at the HOA? She blinked. She didn't expect such frankness. "For all of that," she murmured. "I was wrong." Silence. She cleared her throat. "I didn't think it was so serious. I thought it was harmless." "It's never harmless to take what isn't yours," I replied, especially repeatedly. She nodded. "I understand now." She was silent for a second. "Well, that's it." She turned and went back home. Slow steps, head down. I didn't forgive her right there, nor did I fully believe in the remorse. But maybe it was a start. Maybe she finally understood that electricity wasn't the only thing she was draining. At night, I sat on the porch with tea, watching the sun disappear behind the rooftops. The orange sky, the still air, and for the first time in months, I felt genuine peace. No ATV noise, no invading cables, no spikes on the monitor, just silence and the wind in the trees. Some neighbors passed by and waved. A boy rode by on a regular bike without an electric turbo. I smiled. Peace, I discovered, is not something you wait for. Sometimes you design it yourself, do the right wiring, protect it with your fingernails and teeth. And if someone tries to steal it, well, you give them a shock they'll never forget.